a lot of spells to choose from in Hogwarts Legacy, and while they all have their uses, there are certainly ones that are better than others. So in this video, we want to cover the best spells in Hogwarts Legacy, important tricks and combos you can do with them, as well as tell you how to get them. If you've been enjoying Hogwarts Legacy and like the content here on the channel, then leave a like to help us out, subscribe for way more spoiler-free tips and tricks videos on the game, and let's go. So let's start at the top of your spell list with the control spells, which all focus on holding an enemy in position for as long as possible. And the real standout here is easily Glacius, freezing an enemy in place. But you don't want to wait for them to thaw out, as the reason why Glacius is the best control spell in the game is because it heavily increases the damage of your next attack. It almost doubles it in most cases, as you can see here that casting Diffindo on this enemy deals 428 damage, but after freezing him with Glacius first, it goes up to 1050. So if you follow up with a high damage red spell, you will easily be able to burst down most regular enemies with just that simple combo. You can further upgrade the spell by unlocking the talent for it, which causes ice shards to blast nearby targets when you attack a frozen enemy. It's not the best talent, but worth unlocking if you still have a leftover talent point, as it will really increase your damage output against groups of enemies. You get Glacius from completing your first assignment for Madame Kogawa, which unlocks after completing the main mission, the map chamber. Now, one thing you should keep in mind is that Glacius does not work on every enemy. Where a normal enemy would be frozen in place for a full 10 seconds, the tanky executioner wizards, trolls, or the big matriarch spiders will just shrug this effect off. Although if you cast Glacius and a damage spell like Incendio in quick succession, the damage of the second spell will still be increased, even more so if you also manage to stun the target before doing this. Especially against trolls, this can make a huge difference. As you can see, we are able to increase the damage of the Incendio spell from the base 475 to over 3000 on a stunned and frozen troll. But these enemy types tend to be immune to most control and force spells, so the yellow and purple categories. They can't be lifted up in the air, they can't be pushed back, and they also cannot be turned into barrels with the incredibly useful transformation spell. Which is a shame, as that last one will definitely make short work of regular enemies. This one is unlocked a bit later in the story during your second main mission after it turns winter. Now you might frown and think, how does turning an enemy into a barrel make short work of them? Well, if you unlock the talent for this spell, you turn them into explosive barrels, which you can then also throw and deal big damage to other enemies. You sadly cannot use the ancient magic throw on a barrel if you don't have the talent, but even without the upgrade, it can be incredibly powerful if you pair it with the right spell. Normally, turning an enemy into a barrel and dealing damage to it will revert them back to their normal form with no damage to the enemy, but if you hit this barrel with the force spell Depulso, it blasts the barrel away and instantly kills the enemy. We mentioned this combo and more in our best spell combo video, so I'll link to that one in the video description for if you're curious. Finally, the transformation spell is also great to deal with the annoying Animagus wizards, as casting it on them while they are in their wolf form will instantly turn them back to their normal form and also stun them. But the best way to fight these dark wizards, and any enemy type really, is by using the Unforgivable Curses. And it would be easy to say that Avada Kedavra is the best one, as it can one-shot any target regardless of their health. But it does have a pretty long cooldown of 1 minute and 30 seconds, and since you tend to do more fights against groups of enemies than you do against single tanky targets, I'd argue that Imperio is even stronger. If you manage to grab control of a troll or a giant spider in a drawn out fight, they can really do some damage, often taking out multiple enemies by themselves. And thanks to the short cooldown, once the control effect runs out, you won't have to wait long before you can cast it again. There's even a trick you can do where you can repeatedly cast Petrificus Totalis on a target under the effect of Imperio. This only works against the last enemy standing, but it's a great way to deal with a troll, for instance, as you can just keep hitting him with a high damage spell without him being able to do anything back. And even Crucio is really useful too, locking enemies in place and dealing damage over time. But all these Unforgivable Curses really start to shine when you also invest some talent points in the Dark Arts tree. We made a video on that too, showing you how you can wipe out entire groups of enemies with Avada Kedavra, so I'll leave a link to it in the video description. All the Unforgivable Curses are, by the way, unlocked by playing through the companion questline for Sebastian Sallow. You learn your first curse, Crucio, shortly after partaking in your first astronomy class, and from that point just keep following Sebastian's quest whenever they pop up to learn the other two. But if you'd rather not meddle with dark magic, there are still a lot of powerful spells to choose from. We mentioned Depulso earlier, and it's actually one of the strongest force spells in the game. Any force spell that can also help you deal damage is great, great, and even without that transformation combo we mentioned, there is a lot of harm you can cause by knocking enemies back. Because that is what Depulso does. It pushes enemies away, giving you some space to breathe if there's a nasty melee enemy harassing you. The talent makes it even better for this, as it also releases a force wave around you, pushing everything back. But like I said, you can also deal damage if an enemy is knocked into an object or wall by Depulso. You can also knock enemies into other enemies, or use one of those elemental AoEs to your advantage by tossing a dark witch or wizard into it. I found that you can knock enemies even further back if you lift them up into the air first, so pair this spell with Levioso to make the most out of it. You can already play around with this combo very early, as Depulso is unlocked through your first assignment for Professor Sharp, which is unlocked right after gaining access to the talent system. But I'd argue that the best force spell in the game is Accio. It's one of the first spells you will learn, and it's incredibly versatile both in fights and puzzle solving. You will need it for lots of puzzles or can use it to grab out of reach objects, but it truly shines when used in combat. For one, it's a really easy way to deal with some of the ranger type enemies that like to keep their distance, as you can just pull them in and place them right in front of you for some nice follow-up attacks. Even if you don't kill them, it will keep them disrupted from the fight, as they tend to run away in an attempt to create distance again after they drop back to the ground. Another thing that's wonderful about Accio is that it pulls your target off the ground, or multiple targets if you also unlock the talent, which sets an enemy up for a lot of nasty combos, most notably with some of your other force spells. Again, we mentioned these in that best spell combo vid, but for an easy 1-2 punch, follow up with Depulso to knock an enemy into a wall, and then cast Incendio to slam an enemy to the ground for some nice damage. Accio also sets you up for one of the highest damage combos in the game, which has you pull a target close with the spell, slam them down with Incendio, freeze them with Glacius, and then finish them off with the powerful Incendio. Incendio is one of the red damage spells, which unsurprisingly are your main source of damage in combat. Incendio actually has the highest damage out of all of them, but it's severely limited by its range. This means that you're constantly repositioning either yourself or your enemies to make sure that you can hit them. Obviously, Accio is great for this, as it places the enemy right in front of you, so I definitely recommend adding that to the same spell set as Incendio to make sure you use these two together. You can also freeze a target in place with Glacius or a different control spell and then close the distance yourself. But as you can see, a pretty active playstyle is required if you want to get the most out of Incendio. So if you enjoy keeping your enemies at range more, Incendio isn't really an option, as even with the talent that creates this ring of fire around you, the range is still very limited. Which brings us to the other best damage spell in the game, Diffindo. This one has good range and deals the most damage out of the other red spells next to Incendio. It does have a slightly longer cooldown than your short range damage burst, 10 seconds versus 15 seconds to be precise, but you get a lot more range out of Diffindo. Again, definitely combine this with Glacius to make it deal even more damage. And the talent is totally worth considering as well, because this can let you damage or sometimes even kill multiple enemies if they are standing close to each other. It causes the blade-like projectile to pass through targets, which is super nice. And if you've yet to unlock Diffindo, you get it from your second assignment for Professor Sharp, so simply complete the first one for Depulso and wait for it to appear in your quest log. And while it might not deal the most damage, I also quickly wanted to mention Expelliarmus because of its amazing utility. Disarming an enemy is of course great, as it means they can't attack you for a bit, but it becomes even better if you can start using their own weapons against them. With the Ancient Magic Throw Expertise talent unlocked, you can grab the weapons from goblins or pensive guardians and throw them immediately after performing a disarm. And if you run into an executioner and see them casting their dangerous elemental AoE, counter them with Expelliarmus as they are casting the spell to make it backfire and turn it on them instead. This spell is unlocked through your second assignment for Professor Hackett, so you can already get it pretty early on. And by the way, we mentioned way more of those special enemy interactions in a previous video, which you can watch by clicking on the screen. Subscribe for way more Hogwarts Legacy videos like this one. A like would really help us out, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye!